Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin tonight, I want you to do something unusual. I want you to look around this room, not at the details, not at the faces, but at something invisible, because what I want you to notice cannot be seen with the eyes. What I want you to notice is the state that each person in this room arrived in. Some of you walked through that door carrying hope, the kind that is delicate and easily startled. Others brought skepticism, the reasonable, arms folded kind that has been disappointed before and is protecting itself tonight. Some of you are eager, leaning forward already. Others are cautious, waiting to be convinced before they give anything away. And a few of you are something else entirely, something I'll come back to. Every single one of these states is, right now, actively shaping what you are about to receive from our time together. Not because I will give different information to different people, the words will be the same for everyone in this room, but because what you hear is always filtered through the state you occupy. The same sentence can land as a revelation or as noise, depending entirely on which state of consciousness is receiving it. I did not choose tonight's topic accidentally. I chose it because it contains the master key. Not a key, the key. The one that, once understood and genuinely applied, will change the way you move through every dimension of your existence. Tonight, we are going to talk about states of consciousness. And when we are finished, you will never look at your life or anyone else's the same way again. Let me begin with a principle so fundamental that I want you to write it down. Not on paper, write it somewhere more permanent. Write it on the interior walls of your understanding where you can return to it in any moment of any day. You are in a state. You always will be in a state. The moment you know what state you are in, you can choose to leave it. That is the whole teaching, in 3 sentences. Everything I say tonight is simply the unpacking of those 3 sentences. A woman came to me last week. I want to tell you her story, because it is not just her story, there is a very good chance it is yours. She sat down across from me and said, I have been trying to manifest a loving relationship for 3 years. I have visualized until my imagination was exhausted. I have affirmed until the words lost all meaning. I have prayed with everything I have, and nothing has changed. What am I doing wrong? I looked at her for a moment, and then I said, My dear, you are not doing anything wrong. You are simply living in the wrong state. She was living in the state of wanting love, the state of reaching for something just beyond her grasp, the state of lack wearing the costume of hope. And the universe, which is not cruel, which does not punish, which has no preference in the matter, was doing precisely what the universe always does. It was holding up a mirror and showing her with perfect faithfulness exactly the state she occupied. More wanting, more reaching, more not yet having. She had not failed to manifest. She had manifested with flawless precision. She had manifested the experience of someone who desires love but has not arrived at it, because that was the state she lived in. Listen to what I am telling you. At this moment right now, as you sit here, with these words moving through you, you are occupying a state, a specific, particular, entirely real state of consciousness. And that state is not a mood. It is not a feeling you happen to be having. It is a complete configuration of your inner being. The way you think, what you expect, what you assume to be true, how you hold yourself, what you believe is possible, and what you have quietly given up on. It is the sum total of what you are broadcasting into the responsive field of existence at this moment. And this state, not your circumstances, not your history, not your education, or your bank account, or the quality of the people around you, this state determines everything you experience. What you notice, what you attract, what appears at your door, what stays away, everything. Have you ever walked into a room and felt something, a tension, a heaviness, an unease before a single word was spoken? Before you had any rational information about what had been happening in that room? Have you ever met a stranger and felt immediately, inexplicably drawn to them? Or felt a quiet repulsion that you couldn't explain and didn't trust yourself to mention? That is not intuition operating mysteriously. That is consciousness recognizing consciousness, state recognizing state. We are far more sensitive to each other's inner configurations than we have been taught to believe. And the world around us is far more responsive to our inner configurations than we have been led to think. Most people move through their entire lives without once recognizing that they are constantly, ceaselessly moving between different states of consciousness. They are like actors changing costumes between scenes of a play they don't realize they are performing in, written by a script they never consciously chose. They move from the state of confidence to the state of worry, to the state of quiet despair, to the state of cautious hope. And they believe because they have always believed that they feel these things because of what is happening around them. But tonight, you are going to understand something that will set you free from that belief permanently. Understanding states of consciousness is the most practical knowledge you can acquire. Not practically useful in the way that a new skill is useful, or a better strategy. Practically useful in the way that understanding gravity is useful because it describes the actual mechanism by which your life is built. It is the difference between being tossed by the sea of circumstance and standing at the helm with your hands on the wheel. I remember a man who attended my lectures years ago. He was a painter, genuinely talented, quietly desperate. He lived in a small apartment that felt smaller than it was, because it was so crowded with canvases that no one was buying. He was barely keeping the lights on. But one evening, something shifted in him. He heard what I was teaching about states, truly heard it, in the way that a thing lands when the person is ready for it, and something clicked into place. He made a decision. Not a decision about his painting, not a decision to work harder or approach different galleries, a decision about his state. He decided to stop living in the state of the struggling artist and begin living in the state of the celebrated artist, the artist whose work was sought, valued, recognized. He began to ask himself a question every morning. How does a celebrated artist feel when he wakes up? Not how does he pretend to feel. How does he actually genuinely feel in his body, in his posture, in the quiet confidence with which he walks to his studio and faces the canvas? He began to carry himself that way, not performing it for anyone else, living it on the inside, speaking about his work the way a man speaks who knows his work has value, treating his studio the way a successful artist treats his studio, with the seriousness and order of someone who takes the work seriously because the work deserves it. 6 months later, a gallery owner encountered his paintings. The first solo show followed. Collectors came. His outer world had no choice, and I want you to sit with that phrase. No choice but to conform to the inner state he had consistently occupied. Did his circumstances change his state? No. His state changed his circumstances. As within, so without. This is not philosophy. This is the operating law of consciousness. Think about your own life for a moment. You have had days, I know you have, when everything seemed to flow, when you woke up in a particular way, moved through the morning in a particular way, and the day itself seemed to cooperate. The coffee tasted better. People met your eyes and smiled. Opportunities surfaced where you weren't even looking for them. Problems that had been knotted for weeks loosened without effort. The world felt, for reasons you couldn't quite name, like a place that was working in your favor. And you have had the other days, the days when everything resisted. Traffic, people, technology, your own thoughts, all conspiring in some low-grade conspiracy against your peace. The same world on those days felt not hostile exactly, but indifferent in a heavy way. Opportunities were invisible. Problems seemed to multiply. What changed between those two kinds of days? Did the external world hold a meeting and decide to treat you differently? Did reality reorganize itself based on some factor outside your control? No, you shifted. Between one kind of day and the other, you moved from one state of consciousness to another. And your world loyal, faithful, incapable of doing anything other than what the law requires of it, simply reflected back the state you were broadcasting. This is not coincidence. It is not mood affecting perception in the shallow psychological sense. It is the fundamental law of consciousness in operation, the same law that Moses was pointing at when he stood before the burning bush and asked the name of the power he was encountering. I am that I am. Not I was, not I will be, not I am trying to become or I am hoping to receive. I am, present tense, eternal now. Whatever you place after those two words, I am, you are not describing yourself. You are creating yourself. You are issuing an instruction to the responsive field of existence, and that field, which has no opinion and no preference and no desire to punish or reward you, simply delivers the objectified form of what you have declared. I am broke, and so you are. I am sick, and so you are. I am overlooked, and so you are. I am blessed. I am thriving. I am the kind of person to whom extraordinary things happen naturally, and so, in time, you are. I am is the creative power of the universe expressing itself through you. It is operating through you at this moment. The only question is whether you are directing it or whether you are letting it run on whatever program was installed in you before you knew you had a choice. What exactly is a state of consciousness? I want to be precise here, because imprecision about this has cost people years of unnecessary confusion. A state is not a mood. A mood is the weather. A state is the climate. A state is a complete, coherent inner configuration. Your thoughts, your feelings, your expectations, your assumptions, your self-concept, all aligned in a particular pattern that is internally consistent and self-sustaining. When you are fully in a particular state, you are not simply feeling a certain way. You are thinking the thoughts that belong to that state. You are carrying yourself the way a person in that state carries themselves. You are expecting what someone in that state naturally expects. You are assuming what someone in that state automatically assumes without effort, without conscious decision, simply because it is the natural atmosphere of where you are. When you are in the state of being genuinely loved, you don't need to remind yourself that you are lovable. The question doesn't arise. Love feels like the natural order of things, like water flowing downhill, like breath moving in and out. You are not grateful for it in the anxious, counting your blessings way. You simply inhabit it the way you inhabit your own body. Think of states as radio frequencies. Right now, in this room, there are dozens of radio signals passing through the air simultaneously. Jazz, classical, news, conversation, silence. They are all here, all broadcasting, all equally real in the invisible dimension where they exist. But you only hear the frequency your receiver is tuned to. Consciousness operates the same way. When you are tuned to the frequency of lack, and lack has its own very specific signature, its own felt quality, its own characteristic inner weather, you perceive lack everywhere. Not enough money, not enough time, not enough love, not enough recognition. Every song on that station is a variation of the same theme. What is missing? When you are tuned to the frequency of abundance, you perceive abundance everywhere. Possibilities, resources, connections you hadn't noticed, solutions that seem to arise from nowhere. Every song on that station is a variation of a different theme. What is available, what is flowing, what is possible. And here is the thing that should fill you with hope. Both stations are broadcasting simultaneously, right now. The abundance is present right now. The love is present right now. The opportunity, the health, the connection, they exist right now in the invisible, broadcasting at their frequency. The only question is which one you are tuned to, and you are the one holding the dial. Here is where most people have it exactly backward, and I want you to feel the full weight of this reversal because it is the source of most human suffering. Most people believe they feel a certain way because of what is happening in their life. They believe their inner state is the response to their outer conditions. I'm worried because my business is struggling. I'm lonely because I'm alone. I'll be confident when I achieve something worth being confident about. I'll feel peaceful when the problems are solved. I'll be happy when. But this is the great inversion. This is the illusion that holds people locked in cycles of struggle and limitation that repeat sometimes for decades, sometimes for entire lifetimes. The truth is exactly the opposite. Your circumstances are the result of your state. Your business is struggling because you have been living in the state of struggle. You are alone because you have been inhabiting the state of aloneness, broadcasting its frequency with such consistency and depth that the world has no alternative but to reflect it back. The problems that seem so solid and fixed are not causes. They are effects, delayed effects, lagging behind the inner state that produced them. I once spoke with a woman who desperately wanted to find a husband. She was 35, had been dating for years, and every relationship had followed the same arc to the same disappointing destination. She asked me, "What is wrong with me? Why does love keep not arriving?" I said, "Tell me how you prepare for dates." She said, "I spend hours getting ready. I try to look perfect. While I'm getting dressed, I'm wondering if he'll like me. I'm hoping I won't say something stupid. I'm praying that this will be the one." Do you hear the state she was in before she even walked through the door? The state of desperate need, the state of not enough, hoping to be enough, working very hard to be considered enough. And every man she met felt that frequency, not consciously, not analytically, but the way you feel the tension in a room when you walk into it. And they responded to that frequency the only way the law permits anything to respond, by confirming it. I told her, before your next date, sit quietly. Don't think about the date. Instead, imagine yourself as the beloved wife of a wonderful man, not wishing for it being it. Feel the security of being genuinely known and cherished. Feel how natural and easy love is in this version of your life. Feel how little you need to perform or prove because you are already held. Go on the date from that state. She did. And the woman who walked into that restaurant was unrecognizable from the woman who had been arriving at dates for years. She was relaxed. She was curious about him rather than anxious about herself. She was playful. She had nothing to prove and nothing to get because internally she already felt full. The man on the other side of the table felt a completely different person because she was a completely different person in the sense that mattered most. The state had changed. They were engaged within 6 months. This reversal of cause and effect, this understanding that the inner state is the cause and the outer circumstance is the effect, is perhaps the most difficult idea for the human mind to genuinely accept because it runs directly counter to everything we have been conditioned to believe. We have been taught that reality is solid and independent and that we must adapt ourselves to it. We have been taught to feel how circumstances warrant feeling, to be realistic, to let what is visible determine what is believed. The entire architecture of conventional thinking is built on the premise that the outer world is primary and the inner world is responsive. But consciousness, and I have said this many times and will say it again, as long as I have breath, consciousness is the only reality. External circumstances are consciousness made manifest. They are the visible form of invisible assumptions. The world you see around you is not primary. It is the shadow of the inner world that produced it. Change the inner world genuinely, at the level of assumption, not merely at the surface level of positive thinking, and the outer world must change with it. This is not theory, it is law. As absolute and as impersonal as gravity. Gravity does not ask whether you deserve to fall. The law of consciousness does not ask whether your desire is reasonable. It simply delivers the objectified form of the state you most consistently occupy. And this should be the most liberating thing you have ever heard, because it means that you do not have to wait for conditions to change before you are allowed to feel differently. It means you do not have to be at the mercy of what other people do or don't do. It means the door to a different life is not located somewhere out in the world. It is located in your own consciousness, and you are standing in front of it right now. In this very moment, you could choose to be in the state of gratitude, the state of love, the state of abundance, the state of perfect health, not because your outer circumstances warrant these states, but because you are the operant power. You are consciousness itself, the creative power of the universe wearing a human face, having temporarily forgotten what it is. But here is where I need to slow down and be very precise with you, because this is exactly where most people stumble. Choosing a state is not the same as trying to feel something. When people first encounter this teaching, they often make the mistake of attempting to force a different inner state through willpower. They grit their teeth and command themselves to feel confident when they feel afraid. They paste optimism over anxiety and call it a practice. They affirm words that their inner world is simultaneously contradicting. This rarely works, and it rarely works for a reason that the teaching itself makes clear. You are working on the surface rather than the depth. You are trying to change the reflection in the mirror by working on the mirror. But the mirror has no choice but to reflect what stands before it. Your outer world has no choice but to reflect your inner state. And inner state is not what you say on the surface. It is what you assume at depth. True state change happens at the level of assumption, at the level of what you take to be simply, obviously, self-evidently true about yourself and your world. When you are genuinely in the state of wealth, you do not affirm I am rich while feeling poor inside. You don't think about wealth, you think from it. Wealth is the ground you stand on, not the thing you're reaching toward. You expect good things to flow. You make choices from a position of security. Your relationship to money is not a topic requiring constant management. It is a settled, quiet fact. Let me give you a precise example. I knew a writer, not a published writer, a trying writer, a maybe someday writer who had accumulated a significant collection of rejection letters and a practiced way of speaking about his work that communicated beneath the words his own private doubt about whether it was worth reading. He was living in the state of the writer who hasn't arrived, and his outer world was confirming that state with disciplined faithfulness. He made a decision not to try harder to be different, to inhabit the state of the successful writer completely. He asked himself, how does a writer whose work is valued feel when he sits down at his desk? Not how does he perform confidence. How does he actually inhabit his relationship with his craft? He began to sit that way. He began to speak about his work the way a person speaks when they know the work has value. He reorganized his workspace. He stopped offering the apologetic preamble that had always preceded any mention of his writing. He stopped living as someone who was trying to get somewhere and began living as someone who was already somewhere from which the work flowed with authority. Within a year, publishers who had not previously found space for his work began to find space. Opportunities appeared that he had not been able to imagine from his previous state, because from his previous state, the imagination itself was constrained by the assumption of its own limitation. His outer world had conformed to his inner state. Here is something that most people, even those who have been studying this material for years, have not fully appreciated. States are self-reinforcing. When you are genuinely in a state, you naturally think thoughts that deepen that state. You speak in ways that strengthen it. You take actions that confirm it. You notice evidence of it everywhere, not because you are cherry-picking, but because your perceptual filters, tuned to your state's frequency, are genuinely selecting different information from the same available field. This is why catching yourself when you recognize an undesirable state is so crucial. The longer you remain in a state, the more entrenched it becomes, the more evidence you generate to support it, the more natural it feels, the more inevitable its continuation seems. But, and this is the opening, the moment you recognize what state you are in, you create distance from it. You are no longer identical with the state. You are the awareness that is observing the state. And awareness that can observe a state can also choose to leave it. I want you to become a detective of your own consciousness, not in the anxious, constantly monitoring way that creates its own form of neurosis, but with genuine, interested curiosity. Throughout your day, pause occasionally and ask, what state am I in right now? Am I in the state of abundance or the state of lack? Am I in the state of ease or the state of struggle? Am I in the state of someone who expects good things or someone who is bracing for the worst? This question alone, asked with genuine interest and without judgment, will begin to transform your experience. Because most people are so completely identified with their current state that the state seems not like a state but like reality itself. They say, I'm not in a state of worry. I am being realistic about my situation. But when you step back, even slightly, when you notice, I am in the state of worry rather than I am worried, you have made a crucial move. You have separated the observer from the observed. You have remembered, however briefly, that you are the awareness that can choose states, not the state itself. This is the distinction between living consciously and living unconsciously. An unconscious person is their state. Their anger is not something they are experiencing, it is what they are. Their fear is not a temporary configuration of their consciousness, it is the truth about their situation. There is no distance, no perspective, no awareness of an alternative. The state is all there is. A conscious person recognizes that states are rooms they are temporarily visiting, not identities they have permanently become. This recognition is the beginning of everything. It is what Jesus was pointing at when he said, in the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. Not the world as a place. The world as the apparently fixed, apparently primary, apparently sovereign authority over inner experience. He had transcended the inversion. He understood that the inner state was the cause, and the world was the response. Once you have recognized the state you are in, how do you shift to a different one? The answer is simpler and more profound than most people expect. You do not fight the undesirable state. What you resist persists, and more than that, what you fight you feed your attention to, and your attention is not neutral. It is creative. Resistance only strengthens what you resist, because resistance is a form of sustained attention, and sustained attention is a form of sustained assumption. Instead, you redirect gently. You shift your attention not forcibly, not frantically, but deliberately toward the state you prefer. Think of states as rooms in a large house. If you are in the worry room and you want to be in the confidence room, you do not need to demolish the worry room. You do not need to prove that worry is wrong or invalid or irrational. The worry room will always be part of the house of consciousness. It is not going anywhere, and your desire for it to disappear is itself a form of resistance. You simply turn and walk out of it. You redirect your attention toward the door of the room you prefer, and you walk through it, not by force, by choice. And the entry point to the preferred room is always the same question. How would I think, feel, and carry myself if I were genuinely, naturally, already in this state? If you desire love, ask yourself how a genuinely, securely, unremarkably loved person moves through the world. What do they assume? How do they interpret the behavior of others? What is their relationship to the question of their own lovability? And then, without performing it, without announcing it, without making it a project, begin to inhabit those assumptions. Begin to think from that place. Begin to carry yourself in that body. If you desire health, don't fix your attention on the illness. The illness is the old state's reflection, and staring at it keeps you tuned to its frequency. Instead, occupy the consciousness of a person for whom health is simply the natural, unremarkable background condition of their life. If you desire prosperity, don't dwell on lack. Inhabit, actually inhabit, from the inside the consciousness of someone for whom abundance is normal. Not exciting, because it is unusual. Normal, because it is simply the water they swim in. At first, this will feel artificial. Your logical mind will object loudly and reasonably. This is pretending. This is lying to yourself. This is delusional. Look at your actual circumstances. I understand this voice. I am not asking you to silence it or argue with it. I am asking you to simply notice something about it. Every state feels completely natural when you are fully in it, and completely artificial when you are approaching it from outside it. When you are deep in the state of confidence, doubt seems foreign, almost incomprehensible, as a way of experiencing things. When you are deep in the state of doubt, confidence seems naive and baseless. This is the nature of states. They are self-validating from within. You are not pretending when you begin to inhabit a new state. You are practicing, which is a different thing. You are redirecting your consciousness toward a configuration that is unfamiliar now but will become natural with repetition, the way any new path becomes the easy path once it has been traveled enough times. Here is something remarkable that I want you to carry with you. States are contagious. When you are genuinely in a state of peace, not performing peace, not producing the behavior of peace while internally turbulent, but actually resting in a state of deep, quiet peace, people around you feel it. Not because you have done anything, because states radiate. They broadcast outward into the field of consciousness that we all share, and other consciousnesses, which are constantly reading the field, respond. Have you ever been in a difficult mood and spent time with someone who was genuinely, deeply happy? Not aggressively happy, not performing happiness at you, but someone whose happiness was just their natural inner climate at that moment, and found, without wanting to or trying to, that your own mood began to shift, that the heaviness began to lighten slightly. Their state of consciousness was broadcasting a different frequency, and your consciousness, which is always reading the field, began to tune into it. This is the practical mechanism behind the teaching that to change your world, you must change yourself. It is not a moral prescription. It is a description of how the field operates. When you shift into a different state of consciousness, you genuinely become a different person. Not different in biography or circumstance, but different in the quality of consciousness you are radiating. And the world must respond to this person, not the previous one. I knew a businessman who came to my lectures chronically frustrated with his employees. He had a story about them lazy, uncommitted, uninspired, that he had been telling himself and others for years. You can't change human nature, he would say, with the confidence of a man who has given up and made his resignation sound like wisdom. I said to him, the problem is not your employees. The problem is the state you are in when you think about them. You are in the state of the frustrated leader with the inadequate team. You are broadcasting that assumption every time you walk into the room, and your people feel it not consciously, but in the way you always feel what someone genuinely believes about you, and they respond accordingly. He agreed to an experiment skeptically. For 1 month, every morning before work, he would sit quietly and inhabit the state of a leader who was genuinely grateful for his capable, dedicated, creative team. He would feel that gratitude as real and specific. He would think about his employees from inside that state. Within weeks, the employees began to change, not because he had said anything different to them, not because the performance review structure had been adjusted or the incentives redesigned, because the state he was broadcasting had changed, and they were reading it and responding to the new reading. Had they changed, or had his state changed and called forth different qualities from the same people? Both, in a sense. Because the people in your world are not independent of your consciousness. They are part of the field your consciousness is participating in. Change your state, and you change what you evoke, what you notice, what you invite, what you make space for in the people around you. Sustaining a new state requires persistence. I will not pretend otherwise. Old states have momentum. They are familiar grooves, channels that your consciousness has traveled so many times that they feel not like choices but like the natural topology of your inner landscape. New states feel at first like climbing a hill, unfamiliar, effortful, slightly absurd. This is natural, and it is temporary. Your consciousness is like a river. It has been flowing in a particular direction for years, possibly decades. To redirect a river, you must cut a new channel. At first, the water resists, it wants to follow the path it knows. But if you persist, if you continue to deepen the new channel, the water begins to follow it. And eventually, the new channel is deeper than the old one, and the water flows there naturally, without effort, as though it had always been the natural direction. This is the arc of state change. Effortful at first, increasingly natural, eventually simply the way you are. But sustaining the new state requires something specific, and I want to be clear about what it is. You must persist in the new state even when external evidence contradicts it. This is the whole test. This is the crucible in which genuine transformation either occurs or fails to occur. If you are cultivating the state of success, you must hold that state on the days when nothing looks successful. If you are embodying the state of love, you must remain in that state on the days when the people around you seem cold and distant. Not as denial, you are not pretending the cold behavior isn't happening. You are simply refusing to let the cold behavior determine your inner state. You are refusing to let the reflection in the mirror tell you who is standing in front of it. This is what the tradition means by faith, not blind, groundless belief, but the specific, disciplined ability to inhabit a state before you can see its reflection, to feel the reality of your desire with such completeness that the absence of physical evidence is simply irrelevant. This is what Jesus was describing when he said, "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Not that you will receive it someday, that you have received it." Present tense, in the dimension of consciousness before the physical world has caught up. I want to tell you about a woman who understood this completely. She received a diagnosis, the kind that comes with a number of months attached to it. 6 months, they told her. Her family worried. Her doctors were direct about the prognosis. She made a decision that the people around her found difficult to witness. She decided to live in the state of perfect health. Every morning she took time to feel genuine gratitude for her strong, vital, capable body. She would imagine herself years into a future the doctors had not allocated for her vibrant, fully alive, doing the things that belong to a long life. She would inhabit the consciousness of a healthy person so completely that she could feel it in her cells. Her family called it denial. Her doctors called it, privately, a form of grief. She called it a choice. 6 months passed, then a year, then 2 years. When they tested her again, they found no trace of what had been there. The doctors used the word miracle. She knew it was simply consciousness expressing as form, the same mechanism it always uses, simply turned, with unusual deliberateness and unusual persistence, in the direction of life. I want to bring you now to the thing that should shift something permanently in how you understand your life. You are already doing this perfectly. Right now, in this moment, your current life, every detail of it, is the perfect, faithful, accurate reflection of the states you have been habitually occupying. This is not judgment. It is simply the law operating. Your relationships reflect the state you hold about love and connection and your own worthiness to be known. Your finances reflect the state you hold about abundance and your right to receive it. Your health reflects the state you hold about your body. Your work reflects the state you hold about your own value and what you deserve. The law is not sometimes working, it is always working. The only question that has ever mattered is whether it is working consciously or by default. Whether you are deliberately choosing your states or whether your states are being chosen for you by your circumstances, by other people's moods, by the news, by your history, by what happened to you before you knew you had a choice. Your states of consciousness are the seeds of your future experience, exactly as reliable as seeds. A seed planted in good soil does not sometimes grow. It always grows into what it carries. There are no exceptions to this. Plant the seed of confidence in the soil of your consciousness, genuinely, consistently, not as a performance, and you will harvest evidence of your capability. Plant the seed of love, the assumption that you are lovable, that love is natural for you, that connection is simply your condition, and you will harvest loving relationships. Plant abundance. And abundance must take form. Plant gratitude, and you will find yourself looking at a life that contains more reasons to be grateful than you previously knew existed. The law is exact, it is impersonal. It does not weigh whether you deserve what you are asking for. It does not evaluate whether your desire is realistic or appropriate. It simply says yes to whatever state you consistently inhabit. It is the most faithful servant you have ever had, and the most dangerous one to leave unsupervised. As you prepare to leave tonight, I want to leave you with something precise and practical. The question is not whether you are in a state. You always are. It is not whether your states are creating your reality. They always do. The only question, the only one is, which states will you consciously choose to occupy? Which seeds will you plant in the garden of your consciousness? Which frequency will you deliberately tune to? Which room in the house will you choose to live in? You are not a victim of your states. You are their creator, their director, their conscious or unconscious inhabitant. In every moment, you have the power to shift. In every breath, you can choose anew. Who will you choose to be? Will you be the person who waits for the outer world to change before allowing themselves to feel different? Or will you be the person who changes the inner state and watches the outer world transform accordingly? Will you live at the mercy of your circumstances, tossed by the sea, defined by the weather, responding to whatever the mirror is currently showing? Or will you be the conscious creator who chooses what stands before the mirror and therefore determines what the mirror reflects? Will you live in the states that were programmed into you by other people's fears, by your history, by the accumulated weight of what has happened before, as though those states were your permanent identity? Or will you consciously select the states that belong to your highest and truest vision of what your life can be? The choice is always yours. And remember this, not choosing is also a choice. Remaining unconscious is also a decision. To live by default is still to live by design, just not your own. Tonight, I invite you to become the conscious architect of your own states, to recognize the extraordinary power you carry, the power to transform every dimension of your life by transforming the way you hold yourself in consciousness. Assume the state of your desire. Inhabit it fully, without apology, without waiting for permission from the outer world. Persist in that assumption, even when the reflection in the mirror is slow to change, because it will change. The law is exact, and it does not make exceptions. Your persistence will be honored, your faith will be rewarded. Your consciousness will express itself as it always has, as it always must, as the life you have dared to fully, completely, unwaveringly imagine. The power has always been within you. It has never been anywhere else. You are the operant power. You are consciousness itself, temporarily persuaded that it is at the mercy of a world it is actually generating. Now you remember. Now you know. Now you can choose. Go forth and create consciously. Assume the state of your dream life and live from that assumption until it is no longer an assumption, until it is simply the life you inhabit. The world is waiting to conform to your consciousness. Give it something magnificent to conform to. Thank you and good evening. This is Neville Lectures. I'll see you again in the next video.